There are some films at the cinema that I go to watch and it always has me checking my watch because I'm just desperate for it to finish and I need to know how much longer I have to endure whatever I'm watching. But there are some films that have me checking my watch to make sure there's still lots of time left because I'm having such a good time, I don't want it to end. And The Batman is one of those films. Now, The Batman is, of course, another Batman film, but it's not tied to anything that's ever been done before in DC, so it's a whole new book, you know? You get to start from scratch, so you don't need to see anything if you want to see this. In this video as well, I will not be talking spoilers until the very end. I have a little bit of spoiler talk to talk about, but all this will be, you know, spoiler free until I say otherwise, of course. And of course, the reviews are hurling in for this film. I'm going to say right off the bat, this film, I wouldn't say it blew me away. I can't say it's like a masterpiece, that it really fucking like, wow. But this is an example of great storytelling and a great tone. And the tone of this film is very dark. Of course, you hear that a lot, it's a dark movie, but how applicable really is it? This film is dark. There's no room for like goofy one-liners or anything like that. This is about a dark character and dark people around him. And in all honesty, I wouldn't even call this a Batman movie. I would call this a detective/crime movie that happens to feature Batman as the main protagonist, which I think is nice because it almost just goes back to Detective Comics, which was Batman's first appearance in Detective Comics, the world's greatest detective. And that really showed this, you know, rather than him being a superhero or, you know, someone who's just fighting really crazy villains. This is about a detective who's working with police to solve crimes. This film reminded me of films like Zodiac and Saw as well, because of some of the stuff the killer in this movie does, along with Seven. You know, it's along those lines, and I love detective and crime films. It's like one of my favorites, which is why I think I enjoyed this movie so much. It's a bit like how Joker wasn't really a movie about a Batman villain. It was a movie about mental health and the protagonist happened to be the Joker. It's the same sort of thing with this. And I loved Pattinson's portrayal here. Battinson, I guess we're calling him. He was very secluded, very troubled, very angry, and he really defined that well. He's not someone who talks the most, especially as Bruce Wayne. His words are quite limited. He picks them carefully, and that really suited the character that he was presenting here. It's not your playboy Bruce Wayne. It was someone who is very troubled and doesn't trust anyone, and it really suited Pattinson here. It really suited his vibe, the vibe he sort of brings as an actor, and it was really good here. I think it's fair to say that Batman isn't his alter ego. Bruce Wayne is his alter ego. He is really himself when he's Batman. It's Bruce Wayne that he feels awkward and sort of like he's not really himself. Paul Dano's Riddler made for a very interesting villain. He's messed up, he's scary, he's a scary serial killer, and it's someone who you would not want to come across, and as the film progresses you think, god damn, I would not want to be like his next victim in this whole plot. Of course, a lot of people have been talking about Colin Farrell's Penguin, how it's unrecognizable. That is absolutely true. At not one point did I think that was Colin Farrell. I kind of had to remind myself at one point where he was in a scene, I was like, holy shit, Colin Farrell's underneath all that. He was awesome, very, very good. And the same can be said for Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman. I loved, really great. And of course Alfred as well. He didn't have loads of screen time, but he was good, very good, played by Andy Serkis. And then of course Jeffrey Wright's Jim Gordon, which was really good. And in particular, those three characters I just mentioned, the thing that was special about them was sort of their relationship with Bruce. I always loved their interactions with him, the dialogue that's shared between them, particularly Jim Gordon and Bruce. I thought that was awesome. But also him and Catwoman had really great chemistry. You really felt the chemistry there. It's the sort of thing where you're like, damn, these people should be dating in real life or something, because it feels like they've got the chemistry there. Now, the way the plot unraveled in this movie as well, it was very well paced and very well done, and it was actually interesting, and it has to be for a 3-hour movie. Of course, it's always a concern how much filler and stuff's going to be there, but I wouldn't really say they wasted a minute in this film. I would say that it was 3 hours of very interesting content, and of course the huge credit has to go to the pacing. It never really slowed too much. When it starts, it doesn't really stop, but it never really gets too fast either until you sort of get to the end of the movie, where things are really coming together, but throughout it just kind of keeps a nice consistent pace. So, you know, that was really well balanced. The soundtrack for this as well was also badass. Michael Giacchino, I think that's how you say it. He's obviously done loads of other soundtracks for, like, you know, the most recent Spider-Man trilogy. He's done Star Wars, he's done Planet of the Apes. Really badass soundtrack in here, and I think badass is what describes the movie in general. That's how I would describe it, and I think that's most applicable to the fight scenes and the action sequences in the movie, which were sensational. I loved it whenever Batman was about to get in a fight. I was always looking forward for him to, like, start wailing on some thug. It was always so entertaining, especially because the camera doesn't really cut away in those scenes. It really stays on him, and it's like you really feel the blows landing on these people, getting the shit beaten out of them, and you honestly pity them a lot of the time, even though they're thugs or they're bad people, they're trying to kill Batman, and you're just thinking, fuck, I know that hurt. There's also a Batmobile chase in the movie, which you've probably kind of seen from the trailer. Oh my god, what a fucking sequence. It's such a cool car chase. It doesn't like make it short and sweet, it really just hammers it out. It's like a very thorough car chase. It's not easy for, you know, Bruce or Batman even to get who he's trying to get to. So the fact that they drew that out and it was just really, really intense, I loved it. I also really like the way this film concluded. It was hardly a fulfilling ending for Gotham. You know, there is still a lot that needs to be sorted out with this city, and they really hammer home the problem with the city and how sort of rancid it is, which has always been the theme for a lot of, obviously, the Batman movies. It's like how bad Gotham is, how much of a shithole it is, and of course they really put a lot of focus on that here, and it's sort of what drives a lot of characters. This film was more sort of trying to focus on the development of Bruce's character, which I think is more important rather than just getting certain things done. It's more just learning about him, and it felt like a real, like, personal story with him. You know, the film doesn't spend too much time away from Bruce like Joker did, which is nice, so it feels like you really go on this journey with him and see him evolve. I did have one issue with this movie, but if I were to mention it, it would be a spoiler, so I will just mention that in like a minute or two when I talk through a little bit of spoilers, but you know, I'll finish this main review off first. Overall, I really like this movie, and I think it's something I may love one day. You know, I can't really fault it, but I can't say for sure if I love it yet. It's almost something you got to sit with, especially with a movie like this. Like, it took me a while to appreciate The Dark Knight. You know, I didn't really think that movie was actually all that the first time I saw it, believe it or not, but it kind of took a few more viewings for me to realize how much of an incredible movie that is. And it's sort of the same thing with this. I feel like I need to watch it again. I feel like I need to take in a little bit more and just sort of, you know, experience it all just one or two more times to really get a true understanding of how I feel about the film. But I did really enjoy it. I loved the tone. I love stuff like this. I love the dark crime detective stories, and that's what this is, but it's also got Batman in it, so it's just kind of like, you know, a double win. I definitely want to see more from Matt Reeves, the director, and Robert Pattinson, you know, making another movie. I believe they do have plans for another movie, maybe possibly a trilogy overall, which I would really like to see. I think this film's going to do well. I think a lot of people are liking it as well, so I definitely want to see more from them and see where they can take this story and where they can take like the evolution of his character, because I think they've got a lot of potential here, especially with Pattinson in the role. As I said, it's hard to give a rock solid judgment right now, but off the bat I can easily say The Batman warrants a 9 out of 10. Now, to talk a little bit of spoiler, it's just kind of the one little thing to talk about. Of course, the Riddler ends up in Arkham Asylum next to a cellmate who is the Joker. Now, I kind of had heard about this, that the Joker was going to be in it, you know, get a little scene, little cameo. This is a scene, of course, that, you know, we were anticipating, but I did also fear it in a sense, because I was worried about how they were going to handle it. And honestly, this was very on the nose. There was no subtlety to it at all for me. It didn't feel subtle. It felt like they were really like, oh, yo, the Joker is here. The Joker is here. Hey, look, we're setting up the Joker. And it's like, we get it. You know, like, they have him say a fair bit. You just kind of see him through the glass. You don't see loads. And then on top of that, he does like a laugh, and it just didn't sound very convincing. It sounded like he was almost just trying to emanate someone else's laugh. A bit like, you know, Jared Leto when he was trying to sort of do Heath Ledger's laugh, like that sort of thing. It's not like he's trying to copy a particular laugh here, but it just felt like it's just like, oh, I've got to do the laugh because I'm the Joker. I've got to show that I'm batshit crazy, so I'll do a crazy laugh. I think subtlety would have been better. I think a glimpse at him, a glimpse at his scars. His scars look very cool. Kind of reminds me of how like the Joker in Arkham Asylum games looks, and, you know, kind of like Heath Ledger's scars. It was kind of that sort of vibe. I think the look seems to be alright, but even so, like, I think it should have been very brief. But of course, at the end of the day, it seems to always lead back to Joker with Batman. It seems to always be like, okay, yeah, we can show some Batman villains, but it's always got to be the Joker in the end. And I think at the end of the day, Batman has such a great roster of villains that it's like, why does it always have to come back to the Joker, especially as we've just had a Joker movie like 3 years ago. I mean, I say just, it was 3 years ago, but it's also a case of like, I think they could have waited on this. I don't think this scene was actually necessary. I don't think it added anything to the movie. If anything, it almost took a little bit away, because this movie was all about Bruce. It was all about Batman. And then they were like, okay, well, now we need to add something to do with the Joker, as if what they've just shown us wasn't enough, when it was plenty. It was more than enough. It was pretty bang on. However, I would like to see more of the villains we got in this. We will see more of Penguin. I hope we see more of the Riddler as well. And of course, it seems like he's sort of starting a relationship, a friendship with the Joker. So, you know, that may be something that they bring into the next movie, where it's like a team-up thing, which I think is cool. So, you know, we just kind of have to see how it does. I trust Matt Reeves to handle it well, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the handling of this particular scene, because I think a little more subtlety would have been more sort of pragmatic, you know, for what they're doing in this film, because I think it had no focus on the Joker. Obviously, it doesn't at all. So the fact that it kind of felt shoehorned in, that scene. Sometimes it can be done smoothly, but often when a setup scene is shoehorned in, it just feels out of place, and that's how this felt. This was trying to set up stuff, and it's just like they didn't really need to. They could have ended the movie without this scene, and we just would have wanted more anyway. You didn't need to set up anything specific, because they've already set up the fact that Gotham is a mess, and things are going to get worse before they get better, which is more than enough. That's more... You know, that's plenty that we need to hear. So the fact that they put the scene in, I'm just a bit like, eh. That was a little rant about that. It's not like a major problem. It's not a big thing, but I do think it went on a bit too long. And that's like the main spoiler thing to talk about in this film. But overall, the Batman, yeah, I loved it. Please let me know what you think about it if you've seen it. If you're new here, please subscribe. That'd be awesome. And yeah, I've been Joe Squared, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.